series. This one is going to be discussing turf and landscape irrigation policy during drought. My name is John Farner. I'm the Government and Public Affairs Director with the Irrigation Association. Really appreciate everyone calling in today. This webinar is going to be a little bit different than those that you may have participated in the past. Originally, this webinar was going to be discussing kind of best practices that we've seen and policies that we've seen throughout the United States during drought times and kind of what looks best moving forward. And then April 1st hit and the California executive order came down from Governor Brown and really is changing the game a lot on the ground in California. So I think that we would have missed an opportunity completely not to spend a good majority of the time on what's going on in California, just by the pure fact of the importance California is to the irrigation industry, but it really sets a standard as well on what other states and localities are doing throughout the United States as well. I know that when talking to national thought leaders, national regulators, even the WaterSense program, we look to California a lot on what they are doing, and it really sets a standard nationwide on turf and landscape irrigation policy. So with that said, we have Larry Rolfus with us today from the California Landscape Contractors Association, who's going to be talking about what's going on in California as well. And then I really see a good portion of this webinar being question and answer. I know a lot of you have a lot of questions about what's going on in California, as well as the United States, so that's fine too. And so we're going to be available for a good portion towards the end of the webinar here for a good Q&A period. So let's, I want to quickly start off the webinar first by going through some of the housekeeping items here. And I've used this slide a lot during our webinars, but it is being recorded. This webinar can be found at irrigation.org/webinar_series at the end of the webinar. I'll probably have it up and running by tomorrow, if not tomorrow, by early next week. So if you miss anything, want to reference any slides, want to hear what either Larry or myself referenced, again, feel free to go back to that site and watch the video free of charge after this webinar is done. If you have a question during the webinar, please feel free to type it in or go to webinar toolbar. We've already have more than 100 people signed into this webinar. We're expecting a little bit more to sign in as well. We had about 250 sign up, register for the webinar, which is great. But it gets a bit unruly if we were to open up the lines for a live Q&A period. So we want to have as much interaction as possible. And in order to do so, we really have to have those questions typed in. And I will go ahead and capture those throughout my presentation and Larry's presentation. And we'll go ahead and have a moderated Q&A session at the very end. Also, if you are looking to get a CEU for this webinar, this is worth a Tier 1 CEU from the Irrigation Association. So please keep record of your attendance. We have a record of you attending as well already in our database. So through you registering through the IA website, we already know that you have signed in and registered, and we can keep track on you sticking around for the full webinar as well. So with that said, I think a lot of you know who the Irrigation Association is, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But just to show you where this all falls into things, advocacy is really one half of our core strategic initiatives and what we're doing at the Irrigation Association. And when it comes to drought, we really focus on those three buckets beneath advocacy: government affairs, public affairs, standards and codes. Government affairs for the pure fact that we're working with government regulators throughout the United States during drought times. In 2012, I'll talk a little bit about what happened in 2012 during my portion of the presentation. But in 2012, we worked a lot with those in the Midwest, with legislators in Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska, Alabama, Louisiana. Those states that were hardest hit by drought in 2012, worked very closely with them on just a true lobbying basis. But then there's public affairs as well, and we're seeing a lot of that right now surround what's going on in California. This declaration that was made last week on April 1st really became a national discussion. The New York Times has picked it up. The Wall Street Journal has picked it up. National newspapers, local newspapers, national magazines are all discussing what's going on in California. And what's going on in California is really throwing a spotlight on the amount of water used in agriculture, the value of landscape irrigation, the value of turf grass. So to really get involved in those debates, a public affairs awareness and public affairs activity needs to happen. Really, we need to try to set the tone on the value that irrigation and landscape maintenance brings to the table when it comes to irrigation during drought. And then standards and codes. A lot of what we're going to be doing now lies in the standards and code side. Moving forward, as these new regulations become implemented, they will be referencing standards that are out there on irrigation products and technologies, as well as best management practices, and then referencing codes that are out there, whether it's Cal Green, which is the uniform code in California on green buildings, or a national code, whether ICC Green Construction Code or IATMO's Green Construction Code. So there's a lot of codes that are out there as well, and so we have to be involved to make sure that best management practices, efficient technologies, and the value of irrigation is uniform throughout those standards and codes activities as well. So this is a snapshot of where we are right now throughout the United States. You can see California, of course, continues to be in severe drought. There's also some drought occurring in Oklahoma, Texas, and really throughout the western portion of the United States. This is brand new. It became live this morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, and it was a snapshot of April 7th, so just a couple of days ago. There's a snapshot of where we are in the United States. But what I want to do first is go through kind of the history of drought in the United States, looking at where we were years ago and where we are now, to put kind of the policies we're going to be discussing in perspective. So this is another snapshot of where we are right now in the West. You can see the outline of the counties throughout California and Nevada, up into Oregon as well, and down into Arizona, all under drought, with California being kind of the epicenter of where we are right now. But nationally, as we look at this nationally, while California is driving this, it's really becoming more a drought of the West. And of course, California continues to drive the discussion, and people are looking to California because of the announcements that were made. But it's really a Western drought that we're dealing with right now. Now let's hop in our DeLorean time machines and go back to 2007. This is a snapshot of July 31st, 2007. Now, to put this into perspective, AB 1881 in California was signed into law on September 28, 2006. So as the model ordinance was under discussion and then really became finalized in 2009, 2010, this is the drought. This is what we were seeing in California. So this was July 31st, 2007. So you can see in 2008, it kind of came back a little bit. That drought was still there, but it wasn't that deep red that we're seeing right now, nor what we saw in 2007. So drought still occurred, but you can see by the time 2009 went, we're still kind of in that same area of drought. The no drought to the kind of the limited drought that was there. And by 2010, it was pretty much gone. So remember those days, those that were coming out of the drought in 2010, entering the days of the model ordinance, really hitting the ground and begun to be implemented throughout California. Now we're in 2011. Now I take a step back and look at the entire United States in 2011. You can see California and the West is really in the white, but this is when Texas had one of their most significant droughts imaginable, ever on record. At this time, the state legislature and the administration and the Department of Environmental Protection down there in Texas were considering eliminating all irrigation for turfgrass, landscapes, nurseries, and greenhouses. So as you can see, as you can tell by that, the industry really had to pull together and figure out what to do. And kudos really goes to the local people on the ground in Texas, the Texas Nursery and Landscape Association, working with folks like Home Depot, Lowe's, Scotts, other private business, as well as other associations that understood the economics behind what we were trying to do, and really went forward with a public awareness campaign to promote best practices. And this was called the Texas Water Smart Campaign. It's still up and running today, even though Texas Commissioner Todd Staples is no longer the Texas Ag Commissioner down there. He really spearheaded the entire process. And what this really focused on was, instead of full-on no irrigation on turfgrass, landscapes, greenhouses and nurseries, which would have decimated that industry down there. They really focused on a public awareness campaign promoting best practices on landscaping, lawn care, and irrigation to minimize water use and conserve as much as possible. And it was very successful. By the time we hit 2012, Texas was coming out of their drought, and then by that point it was really hitting the Midwest, up into Indiana, down into Kentucky, somewhat in Tennessee, and Arkansas was hit a lot as well, and you can see down into Kansas as well. So drought was kind of moving out of Texas in 2012. You still had some, but really moved in the Midwest at that point. You can see the West right here in 2012. You had Colorado, somewhat in drought, down into New Mexico. This is really a long way of saying throughout the United States, we are either in a drought, getting out of a drought, or preparing for a drought. And so when it comes to turfgrass, landscape, irrigation policy, as far as the Irrigation Association goes, we are promoting policies that are sustainable through the preparedness of drought, during drought, and getting out of drought, making sure that those best practices stay in use, whereas if we go run to one side during drought, that those restrictions aren't carried through during times of non-drought, but the best practices are carried through. In 2013, same kind of story. We're now moving into the drought that we're seeing right now in California. By 2014, we're seeing the red that we're used to right now throughout the state. And then 2014 again, that's where we are. And then 2015 today, that's what we see in California. So that was really a drought monitor story, if you will, from 2006-07 timeframes through 2015 on the drought in California. We were in a drought, kind of came out of one. Now we're deeply in one right now with really not much let up in sight. And you can really see that by the snow water content right now. This was updated. This was as of yesterday, April 8th. The statewide average on snowpack is about 8%. So you can see up in the Northern Sierra, Trinity, Central Sierra, they're at 8% right now of normal, and then Southern Sierra is 7%. So the snowpack right now is in a dire situation. The formal presentation from DWR to Governor Brown on April 1st was really what spearheaded the announcement for the mandatory restrictions that we're seeing right now throughout the state. So this is really key when looking at what we're going to see throughout the summer. So with that said, I'm going to throw this off to Larry Rolfes. He's the Assistant Executive Director for the California Landscape Contractors Association, to give a little bit more of a California-specific perspective on the current situation, where we've been, and where we see things going. So Larry, please take it away.
Well, first of all, I'd like to set the stage for the governor's recent drought proclamation. And you know, when I look back at where we've come from in the recent history of landscape water conservation in California, I see the state's repeated droughts as important benchmarks. You know, it seems like each drought resulted in a flurry of regulation, and then everyone seems to get complacent for a while until the next drought comes, as it always does, and then we go into a panic again. But each drought results in some permanent changes to the way landscaping is done. And something for all of us to contemplate now is, you know, what permanent changes to our industry will take place as a result of this very severe drought. It seems like droughts come and go. Every decade has at least one of them. There was the very severe one in 1976 and 77. That was kind of before my time. I started at CLCA in 1985. There was a drought in 87 through 1992. And, you know, that resulted, at least in my mind, in the first model water efficient landscape ordinance, in the Water Agency Memorandum of Understanding with best management practices for urban water agencies. It resulted in the Irvine Ranch Water District's landscape water conservation rate structure. It even resulted in the California Green Industry Council at the time. Another drought took place from 2000 to 2002, and that resulted in really really some very serious conservation on the local level by water agencies, to the point where even though population grew during the 90s and after that, the water use stayed flat. Then there was the drought from 2007 to 2009 during the Schwarzenegger governorship, and there we saw the model water ordinance update. We saw the BMPs were updated. There were new California green building standards codes for residential and for non-residential. Gray water standards were loosened up. Rainwater capture standards were set. The Governor Schwarzenegger had his 20 by 2020 water conservation plan, and then there was legislation that required water agencies to meet certain targets to save 20% per capita by the year 2020. And then now we are in yet another drought. It began in 2012. Who knows how long it will continue? We're in the fourth year. I think we started to take it seriously last year. In January of last year, Governor Brown declared a statewide drought emergency, and really for the first time since that drought in the 70s, the Water Board ordered curtailment of water diversions for many junior water rights holders. Then in April of last year, Governor Brown signed a second drought emergency. This one called for 20% savings. And he instructed the State Water Resources Control Board to direct urban water suppliers that were not already implementing drought response plans to limit outdoor irrigation and other wasteful practices that he had identified in his order. And one of the wasteful practices that he identified was irrigating more than 2 times a week. Irrigating more than 2 times a week was wasteful, according to Governor Brown, as stated in that order. Well, then the Water Board went to work last year and adopted its emergency regs in July. And the regulations applied to individuals, every citizen, and then other regs apply to just the water agencies. Those that apply to citizens, there was included a runoff ban. There was a ban on runoff and serious fines for runoff. Also, water features with potable water had to have recirculating systems. And then for water agencies, what the board did was they required urban water suppliers to activate their water shortage contingency plans. Every urban water agency is supposed to have one. They had to activate them to a level where outdoor restrictions were mandatory. So they had to go to, the plans have different actions for different stages of a drought, and they were required to go to a stage that had some mandatory actions. And often this meant day-of-the-week restrictions, perhaps 3 days a week, 2 days a week, whatever. And there was but they also had an exemption for agencies with allocation-based rate structures. If they achieved a level of conservation that would have been superior to that, limiting outdoor irrigation to 2 days a week or less. My organization, CLCA, supported these emergency regs. We especially liked the runoff prohibition, but we supported it. And anyway, but so far as of last year, California's emergency drought actions were very measured and very deliberate. In fact, if you think about it, the regs last year weren't even approved by the Office of Administrative Law until July 28th. Well, the summer was half over by then, really. So anyway, very measured. This year, though, a lot more urgency. Why? Well, we're in a more dire situation. The state has not saved that 20%, not even close to it. Severe groundwater overdrafting, the smallest snowpack in recorded history, reservoirs low, delta smelt on their way to extinction, salmon runs threatened. I can go on and on and on. So back on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, the Water Board adopted new regulations. And what they did was they continued all the ones from last year. So all the ones from last year are continued until, they will now continue until February of 2016, but they also did some other things. One thing, and this, again, this applies to all citizens, no irrigating now during rainfall or 2 days after any measurable rainfall. And then there were provisions that applied to water agencies, and basically what they did was they said, you know, urban water suppliers that don't already limit outdoor watering to certain days of the week have to restrict their customers to outdoor watering of 2 days a week or less. So that's a little bit misunderstood. If a water agency is already limiting outdoor watering to 3, they don't have to drop it down to 2. But they do, if they don't have any kind of regulation, they have to limit it to 2 days a week. CLCA, my organization, also supported these regulations. Which brings us to April 1st, which John mentioned, the governor's emergency drought order. It shouldn't have come as a surprise. Felicia Marcos, the chair of the Water Board, made that really clear back on March 17th that those regulations were just the beginning. And you know, I was hearing that from a lot of people. You know, more is coming down the pike and so forth. A lot of many experts and public officials have been saying too that the landscaping, we got to get a grip on landscaping. Anyway, the governor had a great photo op on April 1st. They have a snow survey every few weeks during the winter in California, and normally the person from DWR doing it straps on cross-country skis and puts this thing in the snow and measures the snow to see how much snow there is. Well, there was no snow to be seen. And it was a great photo op for the governor, and kind of surprised everyone with this executive order. It contained 31 directives, of which just a few apply to us. So I'm just going to concentrate on those that really directly apply to landscape and irrigation. One was the one that everyone has heard of, the 25% reduction in potable water use compared to 2013. And these restrictions require that those areas of the state with high per capita water use, achieve proportionally greater reductions. On Tuesday, the Water Board came out with its regulatory framework to determine, how much each water agency should be asked to save. And it's all based on gallons per capita per day. You'll see that acronym a lot, GPCD. It's used a lot here in California, all based on per capita water consumption. And what the Water Board is doing is, what they're trying to come up with is a fair way for, water agencies that have been saving a lot in the past shouldn't have to do as much as water agencies that haven't been doing anything. So it ranges from the conservation standard ranges from 10% to 35% based on water use in 2013. And to give you an idea of water agency use. It really varies widely in California. San Francisco, it only uses 45 GPCDs. Santa Cruz, only 46. LA, 83, not bad. East Bay Mud, 82. But then you get to some high water use areas like Hillsborough, a lot of beautiful landscapes there in Northern California, very wealthy, 250 GPCDs. Palm Springs, 347. So there's a sliding scale, and those that are under 55 only have to save 10%, and the next range saves 20%. The next range is going to be asked to save 25, and then those that are over 165 GPCDs, they're supposed to save 35%. So they've got the sliding scale here. The goal, the State Water Resources Control Board, the goal is to set an average of, I guess, 55 GPCDs. Anyway, what you're going to see is all of the water agencies squeal that too much of a burden is being placed on them and that other water agencies are getting off too early. So they'll all be doing this. That's what water agencies do. There will be a revised framework on April 14th, and then the board will vote on it on May 5th. Anyway, it's a zero-sum game. If one water agency convinces the board that they should get a more lenient conservation standard, then it has to come out of some other water agency. Many water agencies are not waiting for the water board to assign standards. East Bay Mud is voting next week on a host of water conserving actions. Some of those that have been the laggards, like Hillsborough, they're moving very quickly to put in some new rules. What will the water agencies do? They'll do all kinds of things. I think the main one that you'll see is day-of-the-week restrictions. You'll see lots of things. The water board has a hammer. They can fine water agencies up to $10,000 a day for not complying. So that's one thing in his proclamation. The governor also called on the Department of Water Resources to lead a statewide initiative in partnership with local agencies to replace 50 million square feet of lawns and ornamental turf with drought-tolerant landscapes. DWR staff right now is trying to get a handle on this. How are they going to do this? They're talking to water agencies, learning from their experience in turf removal. Don't know where the money for this is going to come yet, but presumably there'll be a lot of money in the form of rebates and whatnot for turf removal. It may come from the water bond, may come from general fund, maybe in the form of a tax credit. There's a bill in the legislature, AB 603 by Rudy Salas, which would provide a substantial tax credit to owners who replace their turf. So anyway, that's another thing. There was another directive telling the water board to impose restrictions to require that commercial, industrial, institutional properties such as campuses, golf courses, cemeteries implement water efficiency standards to save that same 25%. And this is going to be really tough on some of them. For example, processed water that's used by manufacturers and industry, they're going to have to, I guess, reduce their water use by 25%. Already have one water agency, San Diego County Water Authority, saying this is unfair on their processed water users and so forth. And then there's some urban farmers too that fall under this. But what they're saying is take it out of landscaping instead. So, again, zero-sum game. There's another directive telling the water board to prohibit irrigation with potable water of ornamental turf on public street medians. So the water board, its next meeting is April 21st, and then the one after that is May 5th. Probably at one of these meetings, not sure which one, they will make that prohibition. The Water Board is also supposed to prohibit irrigation with potable water outside of newly constructed homes and buildings that is not delivered by drip or microspray systems. So new homes no longer to have spray or rotor type irrigation in the future. And again, they'll probably April 21st is they'll do that. Another directive, State Water Resources Control Board shall direct urban water suppliers to develop rate structures and other pricing mechanisms to minimize water conservation. This will probably be in April 21st as well. Again, this is something the landscape industry has been asking for a long time, so we're now getting our wish. There's going to be a lot of pressure on water agencies to have tiered rate structures and charge those who waste water more for it. Also, and two more directives. The governor is asking DWR to update its model ordinance through expedited regulation. And it's supposed to deal with, right now the ordinance deals primarily with new landscapes. It's also supposed to address existing landscapes. Also, the revised ordinance is supposed to limit the portion of landscapes that can be covered in turf. Anyway, I've talked to DWR staff about this. They're just still trying to get a handle on it. What's the time frame going to be? 45 days maybe, or 4 to 6 months maybe. Will there be a stakeholder process? They're saying there will be, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be like the stakeholder process last time around. It's going to be quick. That's my prediction. Will it be just a cleanup of the existing ordinance? I mean, we've been talking in California about cleaning it up for some time now, but will the whole philosophy of it change? The green industry likes the philosophy of the current ordinance, which is it's a water budgeting approach. Will that change? I don't know. These decisions will probably come from senior management in DWR or even higher up. And then finally, the final directive is directed at the California Energy Commission, and he's instructing the Energy Commission to implement a water energy technology program to accelerate the use of cutting-edge technologies such as, and he names a bunch of them, including water use monitoring software and irrigation system timing and precision technology. Some of you on the call may remember a few years, the AB 1881 required the California Energy Commission to set standards for controllers and controllers and some other equipment, and it never did it because of the state's, we had a big budget crisis for a number of years, and it was never done. They also kind of got bogged down in it, I think. And but anyway, this is something that the governor especially wanted to do, to put in his proclamation, to invest in technologies. So the Energy Commission is going to have to struggle with this. Where do we stand on this? We have not taken a position on the proclamation. I think what we're going to be doing is letting our members know about it. The members I've talked to say their phones are running off the hook. Everybody is in a panic, and you're going to see lawns go brown throughout the state. And we think that the public they're going to be coming to our members, to a lot of them, to re-landscape, to put something else there or whatever. We did a survey last year on the drought. It's a year old. It's early. It's a bit dated, but it showed clearly that our members felt that the drought at that time anyway was benefiting them, both from a construction side and a maintenance side. It's a steamroller, really. I mean, in a severe drought, no matter, in a severe drought, water for lawns is considered discretionary by vast majority, and you can't just stand in front of that steamroller and try to stop it. I think we have to work with it. The industry does. How can we use our skills to help property owners reduce their water use? How can we profit from it? How do we adapt? Lots of questions. Will we go back to business as usual when the drought ends? Will it end? And I'm predicting a lot of permanent change, and I say that based on the history of past droughts in California, and it just looks like a lot of these actions that the governor is asking for, such as change to the ordinance, change to the building codes, and things like that, they're going to be permanent no matter what. So, in conclusion, I'd like to point out that I've been with CLCA since 1985, and back at that time, our members kind of in the face of water conservation, the attitude generally was, this is America. Property owners have a right to plant what they want on their own property, including wall-to-wall turf if they want. And they also have a right to irrigate it to keep it alive and looking healthy, but they do not have a right to wastewater. We define that as using more water than what the plants needed. I think that way of looking at things is in the distinct minority now. And if you look at our current position statement on landscape water conservation, which we developed last year, here's how it begins. The California Landscape Contractors Association enthusiastically supports the growing movement to make our landscapes more sustainable. We also pledge to help shape and accelerate those efforts. Urban landscapes, like all development, should meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I think we've come a long way in the last 30 years, and so has the state of California, and I'll stop there.
Larry, thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. I know we have some questions already submitted, and we'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. I just wanted to follow up on some of the things that Larry said from the perspective of the Irrigation Association and kind of give you some updates there. A lot of the focus moving forward from the IA's perspective is going to be the implementation, as with CLCA, as Larry mentioned, implementation of this executive order. As Larry mentioned, a lot of these have a lot of question marks around them. And there was, 5 or 6 points there that Larry made that are about most important to the turfgrass landscape irrigation industry. I view our job, industry's job, is to partner with those that are implementing this executive order, whether it's the State Water Resources Control Board or the Department of Water Resources, to really provide them with information they need in order to successfully implement this executive order that does not have any true severe detrimental effects to the industry. As Larry mentioned, I think a lot of this can be seen as a business opportunity, so to speak, for the industry, and I'm not afraid to use those words, because 1 year ago, the chair of the State Water Resources Control Board said that our industry, the irrigation industry, can use this drought as a business opportunity. Sorry, I'm going to mute one of our phones there. Use this as a business opportunity. So I think that moving forward, we're going to truly partner with them in a non-adversarial way in order to implement this in the best way possible. 2, we're going to try to do so without stifling innovation. From the irrigation industry's perspective, and it's very similar to that of the full landscape industry. So I think that in working with Larry on this webinar, on other projects we've done, I see the relationship between CLCA and the IA closer than it ever has been before. And it needs to remain that way in order for our industry to do well through this drought. I'll use number 7 under the executive order as an example, where we're talking about prohibiting irrigation with potable water outside of newly constructed homes and buildings that is not delivered by drip or microspray systems. While that may sound like it'll save water on paper, we want to make sure that we are not stifling new innovation by only limiting it to one specific type of technology. A lot of our manufacturers have multi-stream, multi-trajectory sprinklers and nozzles. So why not include that in certain settings? And we want to just try to work with DWR, State Water Resources Control Board, our industry, and others, and to really get that message out by saying what you're doing makes sense. We're with you on a lot of this stuff, but let's see where we can not hinder innovation, but embrace innovation along with best practices, plant choice, right plant, right place, etc. 3 is the model ordinance discussion. This is very important, and a lot of questions remain right now with the new model ordinance. But as Larry mentioned, this executive order puts a fast track on the development of a new model or a revamping of the model ordinance. And this model ordinance is being done during a severe drought. And it's to be carried forward whether we're in a severe drought in California or not. This will be the model ordinance. We want to make sure that this model ordinance works with this type of situation we're in right now and in times of abundance of water. We want to make sure that we're not overregulated during non-drought times and we're not losing the best practices, technologies, and way of doing things during times with an abundance of water. We want to make sure there's a fine balance we're walking there in the model ordinance. And finally, I'll use this letter as an example that we sent with the American Society of Irrigation Consultants, CLCA, and the Irrigation Association. This was sent to all the urban water agencies in California, really promoting our people, our technologies, and our BMPs. This is a joint statement. We support the certifications of the Irrigation Association. We support the certifications of the California Landscape Contractors Association. We support the best management practices that were developed by the American Society of Irrigation Consultants and the IA. All of these together are great resources and great tools to use moving forward when developing new model ordinances, when developing green codes, when developing the new way of doing things, really embracing these and enforcing these. Enforcement is going to be key, and that's one of the reasons why the model ordinance is said to not be really working right now, is that lack of enforcement behind it. We're seeing it not only in California, but throughout the United States. Hopefully this drought will move everyone in the right direction to really look at all of these things combined and push forward a new and good way of doing things. So with that said, Larry, do you have anything to add on to that? Real quick, I kind of just jumped in there.
I just think that the Irrigation Association has so much to contribute when it comes to irrigation technology to this discussion, both from your staff side, you and Brent, and then your manufacturers as well, who I've seen participate in meetings and so forth. I mean, you guys have when you guys speak on irrigation, you are so credible. So I'll leave it at that.
And it's gonna be a partnership with those on this call and each other. So let me get to the questions real quick here. And we have more questions on this webinar than I've ever seen in my entire life on any of our webinars, which is great. So I'm just going to start, picking and choosing here at random, and hopefully get to these as much as possible. We left 15 minutes for questions, which is great. So I'll start with this one, Larry. And I think a lot of this has to do with funding, right? A lot of these questions are really focused on where the funds are going to come from, how they'll be allocated, what they're going to be focused on, etc. And so I'm going to just look at one here, and it's focusing on changing landscapes. So this turf removal, and I know you mentioned that, Larry, as well. And so we don't really know where that money's going to come from, but you have, judging by the way things have been done historically and what you've heard, do you know how this is going to be allocated? Is it going to be allocated statewide, or do you see it through DWR, or do you see this going through municipalities and water purveyors? But how do you see these being allocated and distributed?
Well, there is already a lot of money going towards turf removal in California, and it's coming from water agencies, and it's not water agencies do all kinds of things to encourage their ratepayers to conserve water, and turf removal is not the cheapest. In fact, it's rather expensive, and there is actually a very good publication just came out, I think, last week on it. I think if you Google it, it's put out by the California Urban Water Conservation Council. Mm-hmm. And if you go there, you could find it, and it really looks at all of the turf removal programs and tries to draw some conclusions about what works and what doesn't and that sort of thing. So you've already got that money. This is going to be a bigger push from the state of California, and as I said in my talk, DWR, they're the agency that will be leading this effort. They don't know where the money's coming from yet, but the money will come, and that will be a tidal wave of money heading our way. I mean, our members will benefit from that, and
yeah,
something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that as this all comes to fruition, we don't know exactly how this is all going to look, but it comes to fruition. I think the CLCA especially, and to an extent the IA, are going to be used as resources to make sure our members get the latest and greatest information on the amount of money, where it's coming from, and how the process is being done. And I think that's one of the values that the organizations are going to bring to this discussion and implementation is really getting out that message. And just judging by conversations that I've personally had with DWR over the years, they really look to organizations like ours and others to get that information out, to make sure it's out there, and so our members know the process, amount of money, et cetera. The next question, I'll take this one, and it really, and I'm not going to read word for word, but it has to do with the DRIP micro language in the executive order, and really, what does that mean? What type of products are going to be included under DRIP and micro spray, and how is this going to be determined? And like a lot of executive orders and legislation that's passed, the devil is going to be in the details. And we've had conversations within the Irrigation Association and with our partners at CLCA and others on how this is going to be defined. And really, what we're coming down to is looking to a standard that was developed in 2014 by the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers and the International Construction Code on the definition of what a drip and microspray is. So I encourage folks to reference that standard. That is the standard that the Irrigation Association is going to be promoting during this implementation. And I'm going to be as transparent as possible here. There is some concern that other efficient type of technologies, such as the multi-stream, multi-trajectory sprinklers and nozzles, are not going to be under this definition. Now, it is our job as an industry to educate those that are both making these regulations and implementing these regulations on the benefits of different types of innovations and technologies, and try to get them implemented in the right settings as much as possible. So with that said, that is our plan moving forward. If you have any questions, specific questions on that, my email address is on the screen. Brent Meekum, who's on the phone, we try to unmute his phone here pretty soon to see if he's available to comment on any of this. He's available as well as the technical expert. But this is what we are doing from the IA's perspective moving forward, and again, working with CLCA and others on this. I'm going to unmute Brent's phone real quick to see if he has any comments. Brent, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Perfect. Do you have any perspective on the presentations or the comments that I just made there?
I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. I think one of the things that I noticed when the Governor Brown and the sound bites that made the national news, he said that California is in for a new normal. And that's actually been discussed in the landscaping world with the CUWCC and stuff for a couple of years, that things do have to change. I think it offers an opportunity for those who want to embrace helping identify the new normal, what the landscapes are going to look like, how will irrigation be integrated into that, and And so drought causes all kinds of angst, and I've gone through it before, and it takes a lot of energy, and you spend more time in meetings than anything, and if none of those meetings produces a gallon of water, that it gets people thinking, and you start to change how you do things. And I think as landscapers, we have the opportunity to also be the educator of our customers to get them on board, because if there's no water, there's no water, and the governor has had to do what he's done in order to maybe get the state through one more year, and you hope that it's going to rain at some future date, but you can't count on that. So I see it as an opportunity, but it's not going to come without some pain.
Great point. And there was a quick question on the number of that standard. The number of that standard is ASABE/ICC 802-2014. It's the Landscape Irrigation Sprinkler and Emitter Standard. This will be a document that is referenced a lot, at least from the IA's perspective, during a lot of these discussions and implementation of the executive order, the new model ordinance that's being developed, and other construction green code conversations that are happening right now in California and nationally. We've had some questions as well on certification, promotion, and certification requirements. Now, through AB 1881, we know that the IEA's Certified Landscape Irrigation Auditor was one of those certifications that qualified an individual to do work under the Model Water Ordinance, Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance. This is something that we are going to continue to work with CLCA on moving forward. And Larry, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak to this as well on certifications and requirements and promotion. But whenever the Irrigation Association certifications can be helpful and can be, how do I phrase this properly, used as much as possible to help an end goal, we are going to do that. We see, if we didn't believe in these certifications, the industry would not be in the business of developing these certifications. So we think these certifications add value. We think it adds value to the end result, which is either water conservation and or a functioning landscape, promotion of efficient technologies, best practices, etc. So we see these as being tools, whether it's a CLIA, a CIT, CIC, or CID. Those are excellent tools to have for individuals to promote themselves through these different regulations as someone who can really know what to do in these settings to help conserve water. I know CLCA also has their certification as well. This is something that the IEA and CLCA can jointly promote. We did so through our letter that was sent back in last month with promoting our certifications, technologies, as well as the Certified Water Manager from CLCA. But we view all of these as being crucial components of our advocacy moving forward in these different discussions. And Larry, I don't. Do you have any thoughts on that?
The model ordinance requires the model ordinance applies, to new construction primarily commercial, but some residential landscapes over 5,000 square feet. It would apply to them as well. And these landscapes must have an irrigation audit and the results of that audit submitted with the certificate of completion. I don't know how that's being enforced. The audit must be done by a certified landscape irrigation auditor, and that could be, there's a number of certification programs that certify auditors, especially, including the IAs. I don't know to what extent that's actually being enforced. In fact, there's a proposal being talked about to require that audit be done by a third party or by the building department. Right now, the audit can be done, and usually is done, by the contractor, or he or she sees to it that it gets done. But I guess there is a feeling that They need somebody to look over the contractor's shoulder. And ideally, the building department would do it, but they don't have the staff, the time or the expertise to do it. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm sure that will be talked about in the model ordinance update. Revision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we had one comment that states, ever since the first model ordinance was developed, inefficient practices still exist. And I think this goes to that lack of enforcement and education on the importance behind it that's out there. And as Larry mentioned, this drought is an impetus to really change the norm. And Brett mentioned as well, it's going to change the norm. And I think that if I had a crystal ball, look to the future, this model ordinance that's being done this year is going to be developed and enforced much differently than they have been in the past. Brent, are you still on the phone?
I'm still here.
Okay, we had a technology question, and I don't know if I can answer this, so I'm gonna go to you here. Is there any I'm gonna read this verbatim. Is there any technology that allows us to capture a satellite-type image of a landscape area such as turf and then show changes of current irrigation system layout, estimating improvement of distribution uniformity, simulate chances of overspray, gallons per minute, etc. So are you aware of any kind of technology that's out there that has that kind of capability?
Not that's doing all of that. I actually think this act brings around the idea that, drones could be one of those technologies that could be utilized to start to, capture images of how sprinklers are performing while they're actually, up in the air, and they get to see what's going on. But I'm not aware of a technology that encompasses everything that was just stated. I know a lot of companies will use Google Earth, and they can map out what's going on, and there's a lot of guys who use GPS, and they'll map out where sprinklers are located, etc. Ultimately, I do find that when you fly over an area that's been irrigated and they're doing a good job, the lawn itself does a great image of what's not irrigated and what's got too much.
And I think, go ahead, I'm sorry, Brett, go ahead.
I was going to say, the idea of drones actually being utilized, it may not be too far off, but I'm not qualified to say exactly how would that get done yet.
We need FAA to change the rules on drones used for commercial purposes first, which we are working on with the FAA. But I know in agriculture they're really looking at utilizing this technology a bit more than other sectors, and I think ag is actually leading the way on drone use in terms of managing their crops more so than any other sector that's out there. And I think this question highlights a good point that was made earlier on in the presentation, in that whatever rules that are being done, either through this executive order or through the model ordinance, we don't want to stifle innovation. So we don't want to, if this technology becomes available, but we can't even use it because of a very controlled way or a very prescriptive way of by the way the rules are being written, that's going to hurt everybody. So we want to make sure that the rules are being written in such a way that there is some prescription there, but it leaves the door open for new technologies that allow us to save even more water down the road. So I think that's a good example to highlight there. Folks, we are exactly at 3 o'clock right now, East Coast time, noon out in California. We have a lot of questions here. I've actually captured all the questions. I will share them with Larry, Brent, and of course myself. We'll get back to as much as people as possible. I really appreciate everyone participating and asking questions. There was a lot of questions about the standard number, the numbers for the model ordinance, and legislative numbers. We're going to put all that information up on our website. So irrigation.org/webinar_series. We're going to put all that up on our website, including a copy of this webinar. So we'll have all that information up there, and then we'll get back to the individual questions as they came in. So again, Larry's and my email addresses are up there. Brent's email address is Brent Mecham. That's BRENTMECHAM, all one word. Brent Mecham, all one word, at irrigation.org. Any three of us are more than happy to help you out. So really appreciate you guys staying on. Larry, thank you very much. Thanks for your partnership with us on this issue, and I encourage all of you to stay in touch with all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.